Hello, friends. I'm back. You saw a great marketing video, but that's all this deal is. It's a marketing gimmick, a total facade. And I'll explain in this video why I think it's a facade, this mother of all deals, and both sides are playing it up. But it's going to be a damn squib, and I'll tell you exactly why. So why, first of all, this deal has been done? It's been done to show to Donald Trump that we have options and that the world is going ahead, leaving America behind, and India, which has over 50% tariffs, and EU, which is being threatened with much higher than what was agreed. Instead of the 10-15% that was agreed, probably Trump is looking more towards 25%. So that's one. And second is they want to give their domestic audiences some, reassurance. Europeans also want to show their domestic audience we are doing things, and the EU is not powerless. And the Indian Prime Minister also wants to show that to his, especially those who are badly affected in the textiles and gems and apparel industries and the all of those fisheries which have been affected because of the 50% tariffs by Mr. Donald Trump, as our Prime Minister calls him. So what exactly is the problem? First of all the marketing information you're getting that EU and India constitute 20% of global trade, and that's the EU putting out this information, and the Indian press like India Today reporting 1/3 of global trade. That's so far from the truth that it'll blow your mind. India is less than 2% of the EU's exports and a little under 3% of its imports. India is a total of 2.5% of total global trade, including services, whereas India has 18% of the world's population. India is in merchandise trade, goods trade, it's only about 1.8% of the total global exports, with 18% of the population. So 1/10 of what it should be according to its population. So India is just too small, per capita income of $2,800. And it just can't purchase. That's why it imports so little from the EU. India's total trade with the EU, exports plus imports, is $136 billion. US trade with EU is $1 trillion. US services trade with EU is $900 billion. That is total US EU trade is $1.9 trillion. It is, by some measures, if you look at the per capita income, you can get an idea. The US per capita is $90,000. European is around $45,000. India is $2,800. So from this, you can get a rough idea that India cannot in any way substitute for the US. India-EU trade is like 10% or less of maybe 8% of the EU-US trade. So how can India make up for that? India cannot make up for that. And if you look at India's manufacturing sector, it is a very poor performance. India's manufacturing is just not able to get its act together. If you look at India's FTAs with every country that it has signed with, and I'm going to show you on the screen, since 2010, over the last 16 years, we have had a trade deficit increasing. Look at the fall in that graph. Our trade deficit has increased from $20 billion deficit to $100 billion deficit from 2010 till today. It had actually gone down to $120 billion trade deficit. But we have recovered slightly and come back to about $100 billion trade deficit. And this decline has happened from 2011 onwards. So basically, our trade deficit has grown 5 or 6 times because we're just not able to be competitive in manufacturing. Our cost of manufacturing is just too high. Why is our cost of manufacturing so high? Because we have a lot of corruption. So manufacturers have to pay a friction, a tax to all these corrupt inspectors. We have infrastructure problems. Even now, our infrastructure is not anywhere close to world standards, so it increases delays, times. We have very expensive land, and we don't get large land parcels. Fourthly, we have labor problems. Our labor is very low skilled, and also we have strange labor laws which do not allow flexibility of hiring and firing. We have also very high input costs into manufacturing. That is, we put a lot of tariffs and duties on goods that we import. And now most of the goods in the world have to first be imported, the raw materials or the semi-finished goods, then they are processed and then they are re-exported. So that also we are not able to do because our imports are so expensive that our exports also become expensive by default. You can see that across a range of things. I'll give you one example. In the apparel industry, India should have been very competitive because we should have been very competitive in finished goods, but we are not in textile apparel. Why? Because a lot of the apparel requires synthetic yarn, that is, polyester and all those things. And India basically has given a kind of a monopoly to the Ambanis for a very long time to import this. They import it and then they sell it at a higher than market price, because of which the finished products are also higher than market price. So our finished product is not able to compete. And you can see that in all our FTAs, even with countries, forget about FTAs with, say, South Korea, where we are in loss, or Australia, etc. But even with countries of the ASEAN, we're not competitive. We're not competitive even with a country like Malaysia. We have trade deficits. We have, of course, trade deficits with Singapore, but we have with Indonesia, Malaysia, with all of these countries, we are having trade deficit. Because if you look at the screen, we just are not cost competitive even with these Southeast Asian ASEAN countries. And so even with the ASEAN, we have a huge trade deficit. If you look at the graph of our trade with the major countries of the world, you will notice, yes, on the screen, you will notice we have a massive trade deficit with China, which is the first country in the row. Red or orange is our imports and green is our exports. Look at the size with China. We have a $100 billion trade deficit just with China. And then if you look at each one of those countries, we have trade deficits with Russia, with ASEAN, with Korea, with everything, with UAE, with everything. The only one with whom we have a real substantial trade surplus is the United States. So the EU cannot replace the United States for us because we had a huge trade surplus with the United States, both in services and in goods, in merchandise. We don't share that kind of a comfortable position with any other country. So they can't replace the US. Also, losing a $31 trillion economy, a quarter of the world's GDP, cannot be fulfilled even if we have better market access to a $26 trillion economy, that is the EU. But there is another bigger problem. Not only are we not competitive, so we might end up with, again, a trade deficit, but the goods that the EU wants to export to us, we cannot import them. I'll give you an example. They want to export to us their automobiles, all those fancy BMWs and all those Renaults and Fiats and all of that. But we can't import them. Why? Because automotive sector is 50% of our total manufacturing. Our total manufacturing is around 14% of GDP. 7% of GDP, as you can see, is automobile alone. The first graph, the first bar, is automobiles, automotive sectors. Automotive sector is 50% of our total manufacturing. The rest of the manufacturing, textiles, etc., chemicals, industries, these are much smaller. Electronics, these are much, much smaller. Gems and jewelry and all of those other things, these are much smaller. Food processing, these are much smaller. So we cannot risk this huge automotive sector. So whoever has sold this cuckoo story to the Europeans that we are going to, reduce our tariffs on their cars down to 10%, that's impossible. It's never going to happen. And even then, the government is adding many caveats. It'll only be on internal combustion engines, etc., knowing fully well that most of India is going to slowly transition into hybrid and electrical vehicles. So, so we are selling a pipe dream to the Europeans. We are hoping that the Europeans will give us more access to textile, leather goods, apparels, gems and jewelry, etc. Europeans are hoping, on the other hand, that they'll sell more automotive to us. They will send us more wines and beer, which is possible. Wines and beer, we don't mind. It's not such a big market in India. You can sell us. They're also hoping that we will take some of their, juices and confectionery. I doubt if that's going to happen, but who knows? Let's hope for the best. Dairies out, for example. They would like to sell us some of their electrical items, heavy electrical items. Okay, maybe there we can make some adjustments. And then there is some hope on airlines, aircraft, which anyway we need. If you don't buy Boeing, we have to buy Airbus. This is the kind of marketing document the EU has put out, and it says that we are almost 1/5 of global trade. EU, India represent 1/5 of global trade. That's bullshit. And the India Today group also is pushing out that we are 1/3 of global trade. To be honest, we are more like around in single digits. As I said, India is only 1.8% of total merchandise trade, and with the EU, as the graph just showed, we are less than 2% of EU's exports and less than 3% of its imports. So it's not going to work out on our side for a variety of reasons. We are not competitive, and our manufacturers are going to start crying very soon, and we'll not be able to reduce it. In fact, the government hinted at that. The government said that Mahindra and Tata have just gotten into EVs, electric vehicles, and we can't lower our barriers there and all that kind of shembang. Our tariffs on cars, European cars, are close to 100%. In fact, 110% in some cases. And we are also not going to open up our dairy. That's too sensitive for us. Where tariffs can go up to 150%. So India is one of the highest tariff countries in the world. And the EU is not going to get a slice of this, no matter what they do. But there are huge problems with the EU side also. For example, both the countries are going to take about 6 months to legally ratify the language of this deal. And even after that, the EU Parliament has to pass this. If you look at what the EU Parliament has done with the Mercosur deal just a few weeks ago, that is, after many years, the EU signed this huge deal with Latin America, but it was not passed by the Parliament, and it has instead been referred to the European Court of Justice, which could take anywhere up to 2 years, the European Court. So how they're going to implement that deal, that itself is a problem. Whether our deal will pass the European Parliament, whether it will pass the European Court, I doubt it. So there are huge problems on the EU side as well. So my friends, don't keep your, breath, hold your breath on this. I have very little hope that anything substantive will come out of this. It's a signal to Trump and to the United States, but they might just get more angry. Is it worth making him more angry for like this kind of a rubbish deal? It was similarly rubbish with the UK. The deal with the UK is rubbish. Something they'll reduce a little bit of tariff on their whiskies. What are they going to get out of that? Very little. We are hoping they'll give us market access. Now, there's another problem also, because in many of these edible products, and even in some of these manufactured products, you have to meet European standards. That's another problem on the European side. They have such high phytosanitary standards, and European law requires that. So they can't even remove that because they can go to court and stop it. Another problem is their environmental laws, the green laws. That is, they have certain amount of carbon accounting, which India cannot match, because most of India's products are made with coal as an energy source, which means we are not going to be green certified for Europe. That's again going to be a legal problem. It'll again go to court. So then there are huge problems in investment protections, because most of these free trade deals involve some amount of investment protection. Otherwise, there are not going to be any FDI. India wants FDI from Europe. That's part of the deal. But for that, you need investment protection laws, which will require international arbitration. India doesn't want that. India wants all such disputes to be decided in Indian courts. That's not going to happen. So that FDI is not going to come. So there's so many problems that, why they announced it is purely, I guess, political. And don't expect to be buying any cheap Mercedes or BMWs in the next few years. And don't expect you're going to get really cheap chocolate, European chocolate or cheese anytime soon, my friends. But given the spate of hectic parlays that countries are having with each other, they are, in my opinion, trying to send signals to Trump. I hope Trump doesn't get more angry by seeing all of this, and slap some more tariffs, or he could delay reducing our tariffs, because we are really suffering, and that's another reason probably our prime minister has done this, because he wants to send a signal to those leather goods and apparel manufacturers who are really, I know some of them, they have gone bankrupt. Some of them, they can't even pay off their loans. They've gone into bad debts, and in their houses and their cars were kept as security in some cases. In some cases, the goods were returned. They were in transit from the ships. In some cases, the manufacturing line just shut down, and they don't know what to do. And the government is also not able to provide much support. So I guess this is also kind of a, a pie in the sky, as kind of losing hope for these people. So overall, I would say good marketing. And maybe if this is the signal that you want to give, great. But you're not going to get a pie out of this. The Europeans are not going to get anything in India, and we are also probably not going to get much in Europe. Because also all the other countries have become total sharks. If you look at the way ASEAN is behaving and China is behaving, cutthroat competition, cutting prices, exploring new markets everywhere from Africa to Latin America. China's trade surplus this year has crossed $1 trillion, 1.2 trillion, some people are saying. 1.2 trillion is its trade surplus. What a machine, complete domination in certain areas like electric vehicles and solar. And so same problem with ASEAN. ASEAN has now signed a new trade deal with China. They have just slashed everything. We're going full on. They're realizing that the US market is kind of shutting or squeezing. So in such a global environment, India, which was anyway, as I showed you in the graphs, not competitive. India's manufacturing is not at all competitive. Government would be better served in trying to make our manufacturing more competitive. The litany of issues that I've told you, that has to be fixed, rather than chasing these pies in the skies. It is the same reason that we never signed, so many of the trade deals, whether it was the Trans-Pacific TPP trade deal, and the other ones which have over the years come. We haven't signed any of them because we realize that exports are not our competitive advantage. We want to focus therefore more on export of services. We want to focus more on the services trade, etc., and movement of labor, human capital. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.